Welcome to Spirited Straight Talk, the podcast to help you thrive with the help of spirit. I'm Deb Shepard, psychic medium, spiritual teacher, and author. Each week, I bring new insights to help you heal from loss, connect with spirit, and turn setbacks into triumphs. So let's get started. I have a lot of stories. But I want to talk today about my stories of my mother's intuition. And there's a lot of them. But one of them was when my daughter had just gotten her license, her driver's license. And she had, I think, gone to a dance or something the night before, and her girlfriend were staying over. And this was the time, and they may still have this law, where after you turn 16 and you get your driver's license, you can't have anyone in the car with you for 6 months.
Right.
Because they want to make sure that if anyone's in the car and
they don't want somebody in the car if you mess up.
Yeah. Right. So they both had their license. They both wanted to go drive to go to Dunkin' Donuts and get Dunkin' Donuts and a drink or something. And my gut feeling was no.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, I have a strong-willed child, and she goes, "We're going to be fine." You know, it was very about, why would you stop me from going to Dunkin' Donuts?
Mom, how dare you tell me what to do?
And it's less than a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
They were both they had not been drinking. There was no worries about their driving ability. They were smart girls. But my gut kept going, no.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept getting pushed, and finally went, okay, go. So they got in their car, and 30 minutes later, of course, Mom, got a phone call. She had pulled out thinking that this person was going to make a right turn. The person did not make a right turn and was hit by this driver. And of course, because she pulled out and it was unsafe,
it was her fault.
It was her fault. And her car got pretty damaged. So thank goodness no one was hurt. That's always the first thing any parent asks is everyone okay? And they were okay, shaken up. But what I did was have her take the responsibility of calling the insurance carrier, calling and working with the auto shop, doing all the stuff that takes to get a car fixed. And of course, she's too young to get a rental car, so she's without a car for a while. But there are several of these stories that we talk about with our intuition, but I know that all moms out there are thinking the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember telling my kid this, and they didn't listen, and everyone was against me, and there's a lot of pushback, and they're thinking you're being overly protective, or whatever's going, blah, blah. But we know, and what's really hard is when we're proving right in our intuition. So of course I use that for the future. Remember that time I told you not to go to drive to Dunkin' Donuts? Of course, that had no bearing on future decisions for our relationship. But it was another opportunity to look at, I don't know why I feel this way, but something in my gut is saying this is not a good idea.
Yeah. So you're going to talk about, for Mother's Day,
mother's intuition. Yeah. And I truly believe that our intuition we're born with. I also feel if you look at children and animals, their intuition is great radar already, but we turn it off as we get older. But I know that when a child is born, our hormones kick in and our radar really changes with, I want to protect that baby. And we go.
You don't sleep for the first 3 months. I mean, you just don't sleep.
Then you sleep, and then you don't sleep again when they start driving, right?
Yep.
And they love you for a period of time, and then they, of course,
turn on you.
It's the world of having children. But that radar, that knowing, and I know we both have stories of times where that radar went up. And so mother's intuition is something not to mess with.
Yeah.
We were joking earlier about they should just hire mothers for the CIA or for the court system to see if someone's lying.
Yeah.
We all know.
Yeah.
How many times did you brush your teeth? Mm-hmm. Did you do your homework? Mm-hmm. We know intuitively, and especially when your children get older and they're making decisions and you want them to be able to make their own decisions, but your gut is saying, oh, please don't go down that path. Don't make that choice. Don't date that person. Don't. But we have to be able to allow each of our loved ones to find their own path and find their own way of lessons, and to really just have an understanding between what is our own fear and our own past and things that we did not have as support in our childhood, because we both have our stories. And then what is intuition that is really connected to that child. I know that if we think about the umbilical cord, even though it's cut at birth, it is still very attached.
Oh, yeah.
How many times do you think about your child and all of a sudden you get the phone call or you get, you reach out and they go, yeah, I've kind of had a bad day or things like that. So what the topic is here is using that intuition on your everyday life, but also understand that intuition is very powerful and not to dismiss it. And when people
mom trust it, right?
Yeah. And that's, any research, mother's intuition, it's right on. The other thing with intuition, when you become a mom, is you become so many different hats. You may not be trained as a doctor or a chef or a teacher, an educator, or an athlete or coach or any of these things. Stylist. I think we were talking about all the different things, but your intuition leads you to places of what your gut tells you is needed. And I think
you become all of those things as a mom.
Lots of hats.
Yeah.
No wonder some of us gain weight. We're just putting on all those personalities. We don't have a split personality. This is what's going on. And I think what happens is we're told not to always listen over protective or over exaggerating, things like that. I remember when the same child was in senior and she was a straight A student, yet I had this feeling that she maybe needed to be tested for being dyslexic and things like that. And the school said, oh, she doesn't have any of the symptoms or signs. Her grades are good. She's not frustrated. And I'm like, there's something here that I want to be sure, because I want to rule it out. As she goes to college, I want her to have all the tools that she needs. And if there is something in her reading or the disability, I want her to have the opportunity to have adjustments. Sure. And I had to really push. I mean, it was push. And I had this great friend that's a counselor, and she said, your taxes pay for you to use these services. They can't say no. So it gave me the green light, went forward. They did test her and they said that she was one of the worst cases they had seen, and that she actually helped them. My daughter helped them understand how she got through all of this and was still able to be a great student. What helped her in college is that she got more time. So, your intuition is, there's a difference between protecting your child versus giving them all the opportunities possible for the doors to open.
Yeah. I remember we talked about this earlier too. I remember that my son, when he was a little guy, got scarlet fever, and he wasn't presenting like terrible symptoms, but he started getting a fever, and it was only a couple of hours, but I ended up taking him to the emergency room. And scarlet fever, like if you let it go, it can sterilize. It can, it's pretty bad.
It affects your heart, all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's like a strep infection. But anyway, they were able to give him a shot of penicillin right then and there to resolve it. But as we were in the hospital, he turned bright red, and you couldn't, he's a little bit darker, so you couldn't see it as easily on his skin.
But you knew.
And but I knew. And he had it twice. And both times I had him in the emergency room, and he had not been sick before, where I had to have him at the hospital. But you know when something's wrong, I think, as a mom.
And that's what we're knowing.
Try to.
Yes.
You try to, I know it doesn't happen every time where you can guess what's going on every time, but you try.
Well, you have a good radar when someone's sick. You've done that with me several times. Like, I think this is what it is. And they're like, what? Then it's true. That intuition is good. Going back to that same scenario that you're talking about, when my son was in preschool, I started noticing it's different than your son, but I remember every 4 weeks he'd get this high fever between like 103, 104. Couldn't figure out what was going on. And I said, there's something, my gut kept telling me, and no one else was getting it. So it didn't seem contagious. It wasn't an allergy. We couldn't figure it out. Well, eventually a doctor said, let's just test him every 21 days and see what's going on with his blood work. Well, come to find out, which we wouldn't have probably found out for a long time, that they thought it was his tonsils. And even my mom said she had a thought about it. So my mom's intuition said, you know what, you had your tonsils removed around this age. I wonder if that, but they don't really do things with tonsils as much as they did when I was growing up, in the old days when there were wagons. So we went to this ENT and ear, nose, and throat, and he goes, yeah, I took him out. That was it. And I think it's the same thing where you just know that, you don't maybe have the words or the clarity or the understanding, but there's a feeling of something doesn't feel right.
You've done several readings too for women who have lost children in the womb, and they've known that something was going on and doctors wouldn't listen.
Yes.
And not that I think doctors are great. Doctors do listen, but in their cases, they weren't being paid attention to, and the child passed.
Especially if it was the first time mom.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's like, well, I think you're just overreacting. And we have, a lot of people, and what happens when these children die in utero, people are not as empathetic or compassionate because they weren't alive or whatever, didn't have a full life. But for any mom or any parent, this is as tragic as losing any child. But they just said something is wrong, something is amiss. I think there are, like you said, there's doctors out there that will listen. But even before that child's born, you intuitively feel and know. Well, you had some things knowing about Thomas right when you got pregnant.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Talking about knowing right away.
Yeah. I had a dream, and I still think that it was probably the night that I got pregnant, actually. I was in that state, you're in twilight. And I had a vision of a little guy with a hospital cap on, like a blue hospital cap on.
Those little knit ones that they put on.
Yeah. And not long after, I found out I was pregnant. And when he was born, that's how they brought him to me. It was with his little
vision.
cap on. Yeah.
Didn't you know he was a boy?
I did. Yep.
Yeah.
I knew he was a boy. I didn't find out during my pregnancy, so I wanted to be surprised. But when he came out, he was a boy. So I had everything for a boy. But I didn't find out from the doctors what the gender of the baby was. Yeah.
You're psychic.
I know.
I think using that word, I think it's fascinating where we don't use the word psyche when it comes to mother's intuition. We call it the knowing, the understanding, the intuition,
that feeling.
It's all the same word.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that we use over. What I want to bring into this is to remember that intuition when you're pregnant is the same intuition when you can use for your daily life. Part of that is taking that intuition and transferring it to your everyday life, as well as not discrediting, because people love to say, well, that's not real or whatever, but it really is.
Oh, you see a psychic?
Yeah, absolutely. But that intuition, if you've had a child, to know, even if you're a step parent, I think there's still that radar.
Yeah.
It's just, I think sometimes your radar is even better when you're not attached to a child. You can look at a kid and go, oh my, you can see and know.
Which reminds me of the story with the fake IRS and a tax bill that one of our children was contacted about, and they kind of fell for it.
Right.
And I kept telling you, something's wrong right now. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Right now. And we found out about an hour later that it was.
Yes.
It was exactly. I was like a little on edge. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but something's wrong. Yeah.
That's to let you know whether it's a grandchild, a niece or nephew, a stepchild, an adopted child. I don't care what you want to label it. That feminine energy has this protective side. And when you use your intuition and show your children that you can argue with me about going to Dunkin' Donuts or whatever, but my intuition is telling me, it actually helps you teach your children something.
We're going to take a quick break to hear about today's sponsor, which is Grieving to Believing, a medium's mission to bring parents peace. Do you want to be comforted in the knowledge that there is life after death and your loved ones are still with you? Want to experience new levels of healing? Ready to turn your grieving into believing? If so, you don't want to miss G to B. That's what we call it. G to B is a YouTube show with the fantastic, fabulous Deb Shepherd, where she connects grieving parents with their children on the other side and brings through truly extraordinary and unbelievable messages that leave no doubt that there is an afterlife. As you witness the validations and healing messages that come through from these children in spirit, you too will experience new levels of healing, faith, and love. And you'll be comforted in the knowledge that your loved ones on the other side are also with you. To watch the show, visit debshepherd.com and just click on the show, Grieving to Believing, on the website, or click on the link in the show notes right below.
Mom, 3 times a day. I'm like, I want that. But no matter what, but his intuition was, this is how I'm feeling with the situation. And I'm like, I agree with you. Mm-hmm. And so when you can validate your child's intuition as a child or an adult, it's letting them know to never go against that gut.
Yes.
And that no matter what society or people think or say or believe, that's your radar. That's your personal radar. So as a parent or as a mom, especially, let them say, yes, how do you feel about that?
And it's funny because as you say that, when we're in conversation, we never say, oh, I trusted my gut and I was wrong. We always say, I should have trusted my gut.
Because I knew.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Always.
We never say, oh, I trusted my gut and my gut didn't know what it was talking about. Yeah. You know what I mean?
and even so, like when part of that is, well, we have a gut feeling and it doesn't, something doesn't feel right. And when nothing really happened, I also feel like it's listening to that radar because we need to have that information for a future experience. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we have a feeling about something and we're like, oh, nothing bad happened. But there was an experience from that story, like someone said something or we spent money that we wish we would have not spent or would have said something differently. That is actually data that we filed away for future. Mm-hmm. So you will always feel better if you trust your intuition, even though it goes against the grain. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if we use that with our kids, like, how do you feel about that? And when you look at little kids, they will tell you what they don't like. Mm-hmm. And we go, why? And they go, I just don't like it. But we want them to have a reason. Mm-hmm. Their intuition is probably telling them.
Yeah.
And we're having them guess for it or being, especially
forcing them into situations when they're telling us, I don't want to
do that. Yeah. And we look at them being 2 and 3 because we have grandchildren and we're thinking they're being stubborn, where they may be starting to figure out their boundaries or what doesn't feel right or what doesn't feel good. And there are structures and boundaries we need to create.
You got to go to bed when you're told to go to bed.
Yeah.
Things like that.
You can't have candy for dinner. So there's those parts of it. But when there's that feeling, and there's another story about my daughter. I remember I had a neighbor that doesn't live by me anymore. And I never got a great feeling from this neighbor, a female. And she came over and wanted to take her 2 kids and my daughter around the block in a wagon or something like that. And my daughter would not have it. And I kept trying to push her. When you look at doing that versus listening to, they don't want to do that, down the road, what's going to happen? They're going to be persuaded to do things that their gut says no. They don't want to do. Yeah. And I look back thinking, even when one of my relatives, my aunt, which was a challenge, my aunt wanted to hold her and she did not want to be held by her. She got the vibe early on. I'm like, just make Auntie happy and take this one photo. She's like, and the pictures of her grabbing me and trying to get away. This is the pattern that we teach. When we talk about mother's intuition, this is something we can pass down.
Yeah, that's true.
And something that is
can be cultivated.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, explaining when they don't have the words to explain, maybe really young, but even when they get older, if they feel like this is not my path, this is not where I want to go, I'm like, okay, how do you support that versus, breaking it down and discussing that, well, why? What are people going to think? How am I going to tell other people you're not going to do this when I really thought you're going to go to college and you were going to go do this? Don't really feel that intuition. Matter of fact, we just saw a movie with 2 great actors, Julia Roberts and who's the guy that does the coffee thing? I'm trying to think of his name. George Clooney.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they're divorced and their daughter gets married, just met this guy. And they're like, why is she, they're questioning why she was giving up everything. Mm-hmm. And of course, this is Hollywood. This is that kind of energy.
Well, she was supposed to marry someone else and she ran away with another guy.
She went on a trip to Bali
and got married to the Balinese guy.
Yeah. She'd gone there for vacation and met this guy.
Okay.
So they're like, what are you doing? And when they met this guy, they tried to end it and just, but they realized that this was the right place for her to be. So if we can embrace it, develop it, go into it more, it can be intuition is what we are all born with in different ways. The other part of this is intuition in using that superpower as a mom to use it in your everyday life and still set that example for your children, the people around you, and bringing this up to connect with your kids, whether they're on this earth plane or not. That intuition, as you develop it, that cord from the other side doesn't end. So that umbilical cord is, the gold cord, whatever you want to call it, that life energy, connecting with your children that are on the earth level, and something doesn't feel right. I'm going to give them a call. This doesn't make any sense. I think they're going to get sick. Things are going to get worse. That intuition's there.
Don't date that guy.
Yeah, don't date that guy. Yeah, whatever.
Don't date that girl.
Don't drive to Dunkin' Donuts. The other part of it is that same connection doesn't end when your child is on the other side, whether they're in utero, whether they had a full life of 50, 60 years, you still have that connection with them. It doesn't end. So developing and trusting the intuition and having that connection is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think society's getting better at coming out of the closet when it comes to using the word intuition or psychic energy or things like that. I mean, 20 years ago, you had to still be hidden about talking about it. And now it's much more of a word that's used.
Like, how many times have you heard somebody say, I don't know how I knew, I just knew. And instead of calling it what it is, that's what people say. And how many times have you heard somebody say that? So come out of the closet.
Come out of the closet. Well, how many times a student will say that? And I'm like, excuse me, but explain how you got that to make them own it. Because there's
Did you hear it? Did you see it? Did you feel it in your body? Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing with the intuition is everyone will get it differently. And the other part of it, especially when it comes to your child, you don't have to understand why you're feeling the way you are. I think we need to know the story. Why do you not want me to do this? Why are you bringing your child to the emergency room when he looks okay, other than a little bit of a fever? He could be teething, right? Or whatever.
Sure.
He could have a cold. Bottom line, your intuition doesn't have to have a backup. It doesn't have to have data and information to back up that feeling. It is what it is. And the more you own it and the more you just say, I got to go with it, that's when your intuition continues, the signs continue, it gets bigger. In your everyday life, you can start utilizing it. It shifts. We want to honor all moms.
Yes.
Every single one, whether your children are with us on this planet or crossed over. If you're a stepmom, if you have children that you gave up for adoption, whatever it is in the world that you're a mom, step, doesn't matter. If you're a grandmother, an aunt, we want to honor.
For all the listeners who may have lost their moms as well.
I want to cry. Even though you and I have our birth moms here, it's understanding that you can still connect with your mom just as well.
Yeah.
And they're still your mother. And the biggest thing is on Mother's Day when people say, did you spend time with your mom? Or how many children you have? Be very clear and answer it and say, yes, I did, and make it joyful. Find a way to celebrate the mother or the child or both.
Yeah.
And use your intuition and think about them because they are with you all the time. So happy Mother's Day to all those moms and to all the intuition that you've used to know when your kids are lying or telling you the truth. With all of this said, I want to encourage everyone to watch my YouTube show called Grieving to Believing. It's parents hearing from their children who've crossed over. primarily moms, but there are dads in there too. So that if you're in that place of grieving the loss of that child, perhaps this show will help you heal and know that you also can connect and that they are still with you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope it inspired you. If you enjoyed our conversation, make sure you subscribe so that you get notified of new episodes. And let's get connected. Visit debshepherd.com for more insights, support, workshops, and a book a session with me. And finally, always remember, your loved ones in spirit are just a thought away. Even though they're on the other side, they're always by your side.